They were, at the time, rated supposedly as the fastest four-door production car in the world.
And it seemed that nothing could get in their way.
A straying cardboard carton attaches itself firmly to Moffat's radiator, which is certain to cause apprehension in the Ford pit. Marsden talks of taking immediate action.
Yes, it's surprising what can happen in motor racing. The best prepared cars can pick up a cardboard box, so we're just looking at it now. We'll possibly pull him in very quickly, pull it off and get him straight out again.
Ignoring the pit signal, Moffat stays out on the track, and Marsden approves of his action.
We offered him the opportunity to come in, but he was so happy that he almost jumped out of the car and told us that he wasn't coming in. His car is running perfectly, and he's a very happy person at this stage.
Now being lapped regularly, drivers of the slower cars are making conditions fairly comfortable for their faster counterparts.
Harry Firth, who had become Holden's team manager, was now feeling the heat from the GTs.
Harry Firth sounds philosophical.
Holden's going very well. Well, they both are, yeah. They're both doing the same lap time. With this, all you do is you poke along at the best speed you can, and whatever comes out at the end, that's what you get.
The Ford team manager's obviously happy with Moffat's first pit stop.
We have a time at about 1 minute 50, and for that we have put on at least 30 gallons of fuel and done 4 complete tyres. He's a very happy man. Every time he comes by, the smile gets bigger.
On Conrad, in the last of the 130 laps, Moffat is a happy man as he approaches Murray's Corner.
After 500 miles, I can assure you this is the happiest turn a driver can make. Is this left-hander onto the straight, waiting for the jubilation of his pit crew to give him the wave finishing the race.
Moffat's nearest opponent is over a lap behind.
By 1971, Moffat and the Phase 3 had earned a reputation of a winning partnership.
Everything was on the edge. The cars were actually very, very bad racing cars in that they were on the edge of being dangerous at any one time. And again, I go back to the praise for the Falcon for being so strong and also for the drivers for being so brave.
But change was in the wind. The square-bodied Falcon was about to move over for a sleeker, smoother, more streamlined car. Enter the XA. And the XA GT. Meanwhile, at Ford Race Headquarters in Melbourne, known as the Skunk Works, the hand-built race version of the GT, the new Phase 4, was in production.
The facilities were, I guess, what would be the word, barely adequate. I mean, we had whatever tools we needed, we got, and all of that sort of thing, but it was basically just a warehouse with some equipment in it. The Phase 4, I think, would have been marginally faster, would have handled better, I believe, and that's probably about it, I'd say.
News of the Phase 4 gave birth to reports like this, with stories of V8 monster cars turning the roads of Australia into battlefields. Hysteria was whipped up by the press, and the government soon reacted to appease a supposedly angry public.
And the government found out there was a headline, in fact, keyed by the sub-editor, who was working on behalf of Mr. Green, who's no longer with us, and it said something about 160-mile-an-hour supercars on our road. Well, the government, in fact, contacted Ford, General Motors and Chrysler and put a very simple case to them. If you put these cars onto the road, you will never, ever sell another car to the government fleet, and the choice is yours. And the choice, therefore, was very easy, and it was literally a blackmail situation. Stop doing this or we won't do business with you again. And that's what stopped them, absolutely overnight.
The Phase 4 was stopped dead in its tracks. Capable of speeds over 150 miles per hour, the plug was pulled on what could have been the Aussie supercar of the 70s. But a handful of Phase 4s were made, 4 in total. One of them is lovingly cared for by Gold Coast electrician and car enthusiast Rob Mann.
This is one of 3 race cars built for Bathurst in '72, prepared by Ford Special Vehicles. They were all brambles red, exactly the same as this. They built 3 race cars and 1 production car. And in mid-72, with the supercar crisis, they banned the Phase 4, and these 3 cars were sold out to various people around Australia. This is now exactly as it was in 72. It's back to the ride height it was in 72, and the side exhaust systems as it was built for racing. The race car is different to the road car. The race car they ran with rev limiters off. They would run to 7,500 revs in top gear, and that's around 160 to 170 mile an hour. The whole car is fully seam welded. The roll cage is an integral part of the car. The fire extinguisher system is plumbed through the roll cage. It's a bit lumpy and bumpy, but it doesn't really like being at anything under about 2,500 to 3,000 revs. So if you can keep around the 2,500 to 3,000, it's quite pleasant. It's very, very stable. At high speed, it is a very, very stable car. And the only time you really feel ill at ease is when you have to pull up, because the brakes are a little bit ordinary.
Of the 4 Phase 4s produced, Rod has 1. Another is believed to be in country New South Wales. The only production model is owned by a Sydney dentist, so we can't show it to you on television. And the last was rallied by Bruce Hodson, but later destroyed in a car accident by a Commodore towing a caravan. Coming up, the drivers speak out about the death of the legend.
I, at the time, was quite shattered.
And GT, the next generation. The end of the Phase 4 didn't mean the end of the GT. In 1973, car parts originally destined for the Phase 4 were instead used in a vehicle called the XA GT Special, officially known as RPO 83.
When we were stopped by the government on the Phase 4 program, of course, Ford had 200 car sets of these parts that were already due for production. So they had to get rid of them. So some of the parts, some of the special locking differentials and what have you, they just sold them out to the industry. But a lot of the parts, they decided to put them onto cars. And in fact, there was a famous RPO numbering given to a range of vehicles that supposedly had a lot of the Phase 4 parts.
That same year saw the new XB GT, very similar to the XA, the most visible difference being the coloured bumpers. But new pollution laws saw the engine bridled. It looked like the Mustang-bred legend had finally been broken in. And then there was the final nail in the coffin. Ford decided to pull the pin on its motor racing program.
In the GT was a car that couldn't survive without the image of the race model. So as we lost the race model, we knew eventually that the GT, in fact, would be swallowed back into being a car that really was much too similar to the standard Falcon, and it was easy to predict the end of the GT as we lost the race program.
In June 1976 came the long-awaited call from head office. The Falcon GT was dead. The car that had pushed Australian motor racing was to be finally put out to pasture. The Australian motoring world was never to be the same again.
When the GT stopped production with the XB model, I at the time was quite shattered as a car enthusiast and I guess a self-confessed petrol head. I was disappointed that it was the end of an era, or so I thought.
But eventually, at the end of those 10 years, these supercar Falcons were deemed to be too fast for the man in the street.
I was kind of disappointed. It was the passing of an era. It certainly had served its purpose well. I don't regret it at all.
It was a sad time because, you know, in those days, I can remember the sticker that we had made, and it had, we used to put on the back of our car, it said, ban low-performance drivers, not high-performance cars, you know.
For almost a decade, the GT had ruled the road. Now they were destined to become nothing more than fondly remembered legends.